Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Cloer. Welcome to the Shit Show, where I interview wonderful people like my guest today. And the premise is to have them share one of their biggest shit shows in life so that you, the viewer, can hear just what their journey was like and how they climbed out of it and triumphed in the end. And today I have Andrea Owen, who is such a freaking bombastic person, and I'm so excited. She is a life coach. She's an author of one of both books. Mm-hmm. How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, which, hello, I have 3,000 bookmarks in there. And so this was her second book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. And first book, 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass. My goodness, I'm totally
it's a mouthful.
Yeah, right. 52 Ways to Live a Kick-Ass Life. BS-free wisdom to ignite your inner badass and live the life you deserve. That is a mouthful, but
it's subtitle with it. Yeah.
They're all important words. It's all important piece of the title. She's a certified life coach who helps high-achieving women let go of perfectionism, control, oh my God, that's my middle name, and isolation, choosing courage and confidence instead. She's helped thousands of women manage their inner critic to create loving connections and live their most kick-ass life. Oh my gosh. Welcome, girlfriend.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Can I just comment on the fact that we are matching and even we both have hoop earrings on?
Oh my gosh, we do. See, we're so kindred spirits.
We are.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for being on my show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Yes, I know. When I bought your book and I went just to the first page of the introduction, I read that and I thought, holy shit, this is a shit show. She must be on the shit show. I don't even know if that's what you want to share, but I read that and I thought, she's my trophy gal to be like, I cannot wait for her to be on the shit show.
You have no idea how much it means to me that knowing that I am the trophy gal on the shit show. Like, my mother's going to be proud.
I'll send you your trophy in the mail. It's a big one.
Awesome. I'm happy to share that story. I tell it and I'm still like, did that happen to me? Because it's such a quintessential shit show, but it was so important for me to go through. I was just recording a podcast episode this morning for my people and talking about keeping your old journals, because I look back at mine and I'm like, what was going on in that noggin? But it was
so smart to keep your journals.
I keep them, and I don't keep a lot of things. I Marie Kondo like everything, but journals I keep.
That's because looking back on that, even when time hop pictures come up, I'm like, oh my gosh, but let alone like, your journals from 10 years ago or longer, or even just last
elementary school.
Holy shit, you were a journaler. That's awesome.
I have a Hello Kitty journal that I started in probably second or third grade. And the heartbreaking thing about that, and it's all ridiculous things like who I had a crush on and which friends were annoying and who I skated with at the roller rink and things like that. But when I was 11, it was 1987. It was before I turned 12. And I talked about, I said in the diary, in my bubble handwriting, I said, dear diary, I think I'm fat. And I started writing down how much I weighed. I was an 11-year-old girl and I weighed 82 pounds. And it's like, that's when that started.
Okay.
So that's why I like to not like to torture myself, but just like to have compassion for my former self and to also look at how far I've gone and even I have a 9-year-old daughter and remember what it was like to be that young, to go through the things that we go through as young people.
Do you remember how you felt when, I'm just thinking back to when you were 11, about to turn 12, wrote down that you thought you were fat in your journal.
Yeah.
Do you remember the feelings back then about, what people would say, what you and your friends would talk about or?
Yeah. And I remember that. So I know a lot of people's experience, and especially women's experience, is that their mothers had body issues. and that they were always on a diet or talking about food and dieting and like talking about other women's bodies and things like that. And I didn't grow up like that. I grew up on the tennis court. My parents were active. My mom was always curvy, but never really overweight. And she didn't have hangups about her weight or food or anything. So I was a product of our culture, of just the shit show that is, women's bodies and what was seen in the media. And I grew up in the 80s. So it was very much like aerobics and Jane Fonda and
Jazzercise
genre, jazzercise and supermodels. And they weren't even as thin as the models are today. But I remember we did have a scale, and I remember weighing myself and just looking, scrutinizing my body. And I think what was happening at the time is I was starting to go through puberty when girls biologically put fat on, so we can go have babies when we're 12. But that's what was happening. And I wish that, I don't honestly know how much it would have helped, but I wish that somebody would have talked to me about that and said, like, this is what, it's body fat and this is what it is. And it's supposed to be this way. And so yeah, I do to some extent remember.
Oh my gosh. I know we think, if we could go back, and I know that wouldn't have made us who we are today.
Yeah.
But, we're still wanting to kind of save ourselves from the self-sabotage and the shame. And yeah, anyway, I don't know if we're getting off topic, and I don't know if that's the shit show you wanted to share, but I want to open this up to whatever you feel called to share today, that your listening audience, my listening audience, you feel like that viewer is watching, they're in the middle of something super shitty right now, and they need a little glimmer of hope.
The backstory is I was in a relationship. I met someone when I was 17. He and I were together for 10 years before we decided to get married in our late 20s. And I was very close to his family. He was the middle child of 5 boys. And, his older brothers had wives and his younger brothers had long-term girlfriends too. And his parents became my parents because my senior year, my parents got divorced. And so that was difficult. And his family just welcomed me. I was their family. I was, one of their daughters. And they were also the type of family that got together all the time, like weekends, dinners, any holiday. Someone farted and they were excited and, had a celebration over it. Like, let's get together. And
yeah.
A lot of drinking. But it was just, somewhat dysfunctional family, as families are, but they were my dysfunctional family. And so he and I had been married for a couple of years. And we had always known that we were going to have a family. And it was 2 years into our marriage, and we were discussing conceiving our first child. And I had gone back to school. And so we were trying to plan it out so that it worked with our school schedule and things like that. And, I didn't have any issues with control at that time.
Not at all.
I'm going to get pregnant.
I hear ya.
This is when we have a baby. And so he started acting kind of weird. And I got suspicious that he was having an affair, but he vehemently denied it. And then I kind of thought I was going crazy because it looked really bad. Like, it really looked like he was having an affair, but I didn't have any evidence. Like, I hadn't caught him in the act, and just all these things were happening. But I was also in school full time and was trying to deal with other responsibilities as well. And then it was the day before Valentine's Day. So actually before that, it was around Christmas time. It was Christmas Day. I used to go to my mom's every year for Christmas. And he would come with me because my mom lived in another state. Every year he'd come with me. And this particular trip he didn't go because he said he had to work on Christmas Day. He was an electrician. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. And so I decided to surprise him and come home. And he was supposed to be at work, and I went to his work and he wasn't there. And so I called him and I said, I'm at your work. Your car isn't here. No one's here. It's Christmas Day. Where are you? And he came. He's like, give me 5 minutes. He comes into the parking lot, and we got into this screaming match. And he's in my face screaming at me that he wasn't cheating on me. And I'm like, and I stopped. I had this moment of peace. And I was like, if you're not, you are the unluckiest person in the world, because everything is pointing to that. And I can't do this anymore. So I need to move out, and we need to be separated. I don't want a divorce, but we need to figure this out because this is not working. And so I did, and I moved out and got my own apartment, and things actually got better between us. And we were still sleeping together, still seeing each other. We were dating, and the pressure was kind of off. And so that was in very early January. And then the day before Valentine's Day, I had called him because he was going to come over to my apartment for dinner for Valentine's Day. And I'd called him to see what time he was going to come over. And I was at Barnes and Noble buying him a book for Valentine's Day. And I call his cell phone and a woman answers. And I said, "Who's this?" And she told me her name. And it was the same name that this woman had been our neighbor. And my sister was good friends with my sister-in-law, his brother's wife. And my sister had told me, she's like, "There's a rumor that your husband's been hanging out with this woman." And this was her name. And she answered. And I said, "I need to ask you a question. Are you sleeping with my husband?" And she said, "If you're asking me that question, you and I need to talk." So then it was just chaos from there. It just shit hit the fan. Essentially, he had lied to her and told her that we were in the midst of a divorce and that I was not taking it well. And that because she could tell that we still lived together because she was our neighbor. And she was like, "Why is your wife still living with you if you're getting divorced?" And he was like, "Well, she's having a really hard time, so I'm letting her live here. We're in separate bedrooms," which was all a lie. He had never even asked me for a divorce, hadn't filed anything. So she at the same time was finding out that he had lied about everything to her. And I was finding out that he had lied to me about everything. He was on damage control. It was a disaster. I found out that all of his brothers knew about her. And my God. Slowly my sisters-in-law were finding out. And they had just a couple of weeks before that confronted him and said, "If you don't tell her, we will." I had given him some date and he said that he would, and he had no plans to do that. So needless to say, like, I was so destroyed. And then 2 weeks later, I found out she was pregnant.
She was pregnant.
Yes, they were having a family together. I was like, wait a minute. Like, I could handle the cheating, like that he fucked somebody else behind my back. It was the lying. And then when he went and was like playing house with someone else, and I was 31 at the time, and like my biological clock was ticking, and I was like, I'm ready to have a baby. And yeah, there he was. And they like bought a house together. This was very quickly. Bought a house together, got a dog even. It was just like stick the knife
Salt in the wound.
And then in the meantime, like his family was torn apart because some of the family members were mad at him. Some of the family members were supporting him. And it was a mess. It was a disaster. And so then I did what I should not have been doing is I signed up for Match.com and was like, I know what'll distract me. I started dating right away. And I met actually a couple of nice, normal guys. And, but of course I wanted nothing to do with them. I was so used to intensity and chaos, and like the place I was in was just not well. And so I met this guy whom I thought was Mr. Right. He looked like David Duchovny. He was tall and charming and funny and handsome and so much energy. And a couple of dates in told me that he had non-Hodgkin lymphoma and that it was terminal. And, you know, did I want to stay in the relationship? And I did. And then fast forward about 8 months, I'm from San Diego. And when you live in San Diego, Tijuana, Mexico is just a hop, skip, and a jump. Where you can get pretty much any medication you want or drugs. So we were going down there to get his cancer medication because apparently it wasn't like approved in the United States, and he had quit his job and didn't have insurance. So guess who was footing the bill for everything? Long story short, he was an addict who lied about having cancer. I was suspicious that he was doing drugs, but I thought it was because he had cancer. And I would never, like, I couldn't even imagine that somebody would lie about that. Like, yes, having an affair, yes. But like to lie that you have a terminal illness, like you are some kind of dick to do that.
You are fucking with karma. Like,
yeah. So I found out that he had a drug problem, and then he got clean for a little while, and then I got pregnant. And then right when I found out I was pregnant was when I found out he had lied about having cancer. And that was a disaster. And then he agreed to go to rehab. And then when he was in rehab, we were going to try to work things out. And I quit my job that I loved. And I got out of the lease of my apartment because we were going to move away to Northern California where his family was, so we could start over, him in recovery. And he met someone in rehab that he fell in love with. She had a trust fund.
Oh.
P.S. And
that's convenient.
So my like rock bottom moment was my divorce was like just final. So I've been going through that the whole time. I was pregnant. He had left me for someone else. He had conned me out of thousands of dollars. I had left my job. I had left my apartment. They had already filled my position at my job. So
Oh, oh
it was
my
bad,
gosh.
Carly. It was really bad.
Andrea.
And I was 31. So this is like right around the time where all my friends are like getting married and like having baby showers. And they're like, sorry.
Oh, I just want to give you a hug right now.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Yeah, it was the worst. It was the worst. And I knew at that moment though, I remember laying on the ground
Mm-hmm.
and also like being pregnant. And I'm like, I've got to get my shit together, not just for me, but for this baby. And I told myself like, okay, who's the common denominator in all of this? Like, of course, these guys had done some really crappy things. I'm not letting them off the hook,
Mm-hmm.
but I had ignored my intuition with both relationships. My
Mm-hmm.
intuition told me not to marry my first husband. My intuition told me to break up with him when I was like 19, and I continued to stay with him out of fear of losing his family because I loved them.
Yeah.
My intuition on the first date told me something was up with that guy. Like it just, I had ignored it and ignored it and ignored it. And I had tolerated so much crap, being treated so poorly, and just accepted crumbs, if that, from these guys. And so I knew that I had to take like radical responsibility for my life and for my happiness. And so that's really what sort of catapulted me into where I am now,
Mm-hmm.
12, 13 years later.
Damn.
I know, right?
Damn. Like I'm trying to put myself in your shoes. And I do have to say, like being cheated on, knowing what your gut is screaming at you and knowing what like your whole, like, it deep down in your soul that something is not right, that they're cheating or, something's going on. And they tell you you're crazy. Like,
Oh yeah.
you're the crazy one. That's got to be like, I mean, that alone.
That's gaslighting is what that is.
Oh.
It was so bad. I knew either he was on drugs. I'm like, are you on cocaine? Like what's going on? Because your behavior is not okay, or you're cheating on me. I knew it was one of those two things. It may have been both. I have no idea. But yeah, then to turn it around on me, and he was like telling his whole family that I was a nutcase and that I was crazy. And then, I mean, the stories that I heard of anytime I kind of like start to like wonder like how he is, or like have any kind of like romanticizing of how the relationship was, I think about that. And I'm like, oh no.
Oh my gosh.
But I'm like, never again will I
When
tolerate.
you were, no, oh hell no. And I feel like well, at least, being in that situation, if that happens to my kids or that happens to your kids, oh, fucking mama bear is coming. Like,
where you live.
Oh, if that's not a trigger, I don't know what is. Like,
I didn't tell my dad for the longest time because it was just it was humiliating.
Yeah.
And just my dad, he passed away a couple years ago, and like he just was a very sensitive soul too. And I always felt like my therapist has had to remind me 1,000 times that I'm not responsible for his feelings. But like that was one where I was like, I can't tell my dad tomorrow.
Right. So when you were at that rock bottom, like, can you remember, like where you were sitting, what you were wearing? Like, can you remember that moment? And, like, were you thinking, oh, like you said earlier, I got to get my shit together, before that moment? Like, were you thinking, holy fuck, how did I get here? Or
totally.
like, what were your thoughts that were going before?
It was that was one of them. How did I get here?
Yeah.
Because I felt like everything fell apart so quickly. And looking back from the time that he started, I know exactly the week that he walked himself across the street and introduced himself to her, and that their affair started, because I talked to her. Like, she told me like the timeline. She's like, this is when we met. This is when we started sleeping together. And I was like, no, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I knew the entire timeline. So that time, from the time to the time that everything fell apart, was about 7 months. And then when I started dating that other guy, that was like an entire year. So the whole process was about 18 months.
Mm.
It just, every time like I felt like it couldn't get any worse, it got worse until it all fell apart. And
Mm.
that's what I was thinking, like, how did I get here? How did I go from person who is going back to school for exercise physiology, getting good grades, married, has a family, has a plan to start my own family and
Mm-hmm.
live my life in the suburbs of San Diego, to this disaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know anyone who had gone through what I had gone through. I didn't know anyone who'd even dated an addict. I think that's why I was such an easy target for him, because I didn't know what the signs were. I didn't grow up with anyone like that. I was so easy to dupe. And I think he picked me for that. He picked someone who was newly going through a divorce, who was so vulnerable. He was a professional con man, and they picked their victims very carefully. And I was so easy, but that was definitely part of it. How did I get here? How did I let this happen?
How dark did it get for you?
I mean, looking back, I was in a low-grade depression really during the time that he and I were together. So the boyfriend, and he was not well, obviously. We would spend just days not really even hardly leaving the house. I would go to work, and my work self, I feel like, was pretty normal. And he was also, I think there was some bipolar going on, because his moods he would do things like, he would send me like letters to work, like love letters, like these long love letters, or he would bring me like a bouquet of like 12 balloons and like shove them in the door. And like everyone at work loved him. So he'd have these manic episodes, and then he'd have really dark episodes where I just like couldn't even get him out of bed, and he would blame the cancer. And so I was drinking a lot more. Honestly, like, had he told me he was using drugs, I can't say that I wouldn't have done them with him. Like, I was in such a bad place of get me out of this place. And he and I spent a lot of time talking shit about our exes. It was sort of like how we bonded, because he was out of a relationship too.
Yeah.
So like looking back on it, when I was in it, I didn't realize how dysfunctional it was. But looking back, I'm like, oh my God, that was really bad.
Did you ever get to a point where you were suicidal after everything had hit the fan?
No, I think that I was distracted taking care of him. That was, I think, a big part of it. And it, I struggled for so long with codependence. So I just really when my ex left and I couldn't be codependent with him anymore, the new boyfriend became the person who was, who I was addicted to. And it was taking care of him. It was trying to fix him. It was trying to just really save him. And that became what brought me meaning.
Yes.
And also trying to make my ex wrong became my job. And like kind of the only thing that brought me happiness was that too. And so it was just an ugly time, like just probably the darkest place for me. But no, I wasn't ever suicidal. I think that maybe had I not had him as a project, I might have gone down that place, because there was a time I remember when I was living in my apartment when everything had just fallen apart. And I remember laying in bed thinking, has anyone ever died from a broken heart? Because that's how I felt. I had never felt something so excruciatingly painful. So I think it was the pain of losing him and the dream and my family, as well as the humiliation of what had happened.
Yeah.
She was younger than me. She was gorgeous. She had a lower back tattoo. Like, she was very, she was new and shiny, and I wasn't anymore. And plus the way that I was acting, because this is the thing that that gaslighting is as well, is like a person acts terribly towards someone. And then when the victim acts accordingly, they freak out. Then the perpetrator says, see, look how crazy they are. Do you see what I have to put up with? When I'm like, you're the mother fucker that cheated on me with our neighbor and got her pregnant. How do you expect me to act?
Oh gosh. Way to take the focus off you, asshole.
Kisses.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, and that I actually had a counselor tell me that, like, don't play this game with him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I want to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was.
I bet so many women can relate to, and kudos to you for realizing that, and I don't know when you realized that it was a codependent thing and it was really kind of an addiction. You know, I think a lot of us women have been there, but I think women so can relate to wanting to be that protector and be that, you know, the fixer or save somebody, you know, take care of somebody. 'Cause that's like in our core, you know, to nurture but then realizing, flipping that switch and realizing that that's not healthy.
No.
That's not a healthy relationship to continue to feed and to be in. And yes, you're taking care of somebody, and yes, you're a nurturer, but that's different. Like when it's your kids versus when it's a man and So I think so many women that listen to this are going to relate to that and probably pinpoint a time in their life when they were that way too. Yeah. Yes. Seeing that. When would you say was your turning point? Like when you started to turn around and started to want to pick yourself back up?
Well, I had always been interested in personal development. The late Richard Carlson, I think, was probably my first book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And I loved the idea of it. But back then, I mostly read self-help and like thought about my friends. And I'm like, oh, Shelby does this. You know, my sister.
Oh, I don't do that. Yeah.
I wrote their names in the margins. I'm not kidding. That's what I did. So I liked the idea of it. And then when everything fell apart, but I'd always been attracted to it. When everything fell apart was in early 2007. And so this is right around the time the movie and the book The Secret came out. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
When
that's
crazy
big.
was happening. And I don't subscribe nearly as much to the law of attraction. I think it's so cloaked in privilege, but that's another story for another time. But
another shit show.
Then I was so desperate to try something new. Just the lesson of gratitude. I was like, what do I have to be grateful for? Nothing. Do you know how hard my life is? And the assignment was just 10 things that you're grateful for. And they talked about vision boards. And so I didn't have any magazines. So I drew. I still have the piece of paper. I got a piece of printer paper and drew with a pencil stick figures of the life that I wanted. And then on the back of that paper, I wrote 10 things at the moment that I was grateful for. And I was really surprised that I could come up with 10 things. And I was like, maybe my life isn't so terrible. I had people around me that I loved. My family, you know, my parents were still alive. And you know, I could see there was hope is what there was. And I didn't know, and I also was really proactive about my healing. So I went back to therapy in full force at that time. So this is before social media, but it was, there was like a website called iVillage where I think it was kind of like, do you remember that? It was like all these different chat groups and stuff. And there was like a divorce group for women. And you could still be anonymous in those places. And they were really helpful. And I was proactive in my own healing just because I had that little bit of hope. And I kept a lot of like the emails that people sent me. And I had like this file of all of these different things. And I would like cut inspirational sayings out of magazines and put them up around my apartment. And it was just little by little. I even took a Sharpie and would like cross off the days on the calendar because I felt like even sometimes day by day was too excruciating that I had to take it hour by hour. And I learned what worked for me. So it's like my hardest time was being at home after work and being alone in my apartment. And so I just filled my social calendar and just like went for happy hour with friends and did all these different things to just pass the time. And I knew that time wasn't going to heal all my wounds all by itself. I knew I had to be responsible for it. And to be honest with you, Carly, like there was a part of me that was really excited. I mean, I had had a boyfriend since I was 15. I had never been by myself. And what I often tell people was I didn't know how to take care of myself. And of course I could do laundry and things like that, but I didn't know how to emotionally take care of myself. And I had to learn all of that. And it was a long process. I'm still learning it, but that's really where I started.
And when you first started, I'm assuming it was really fucking uncomfortable to be with yourself. Yeah. So the viewer that is thinking, I can't be alone or don't want to be alone by myself at all because I'm going to feel this way, negative feelings. What would you say to that person?
I would say exactly this. Like, I was the poster child for that. I think one of the very first things that I did was to stop calling them negative feelings, is that they're just the more uncomfortable feelings. And I don't categorize them anymore. They just are life and what makes us humans. And so the whole feelings thing has been a long process. So a little bit of a backstory. In my 20s, I struggled with an eating disorder. As I've mentioned, codependence was a massive struggle for me. I started going to a 12-step program for codependence pretty much as soon as everything fell apart. That was one of the many things that I was doing. Now that I had all this free time on my hands, I can go to 12-step meetings and therapy and all of these things.
Yeah.
And so I got a handle on that. And I also, and this has actually been great, that came out of when my boyfriend, who was the addict, he went to rehab. I went for Family Week. And that's when everything fell apart. But it was at a really prestigious rehab center. And that's where I learned about love addiction. And I was like, oh, snap. That's me. So I got a book there and started getting help for that. And so that was all great. And then I entered, I turned 32 and I was getting a lot of help for those specific 3 things. And as I was starting to let go of all of those symptoms, my drinking picked up. I mean, it was like without a beat, let those symptoms go. Where's the wine?
Right.
And I noticed, I had my son, I got remarried to a wonderful patient man. We just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
And we had a daughter together. So had 2 kids, and my drinking gained momentum especially after my daughter was born. And so I had to look at that very seriously. And at that point, I had been in personal development for a couple of years, and I was like, very self-aware, and I was like, this is happening. And so I got sober, and I tell that story because when I got sober in 2011 was when I really sort of cracked open and found myself in emotional situations without anything to numb it. I'm like, wait a minute, I have to feel my feelings, but I might die. Like this might actually kill me if I walk through all of these feelings. And so one of the things that has helped me so much, and I wrote about that a lot in my book, but one of the things, it was actually a dear friend of mine. She has the perspective of what if feelings are just your body's way of taking care of itself, like sweating or sneezing or diarrhea, your body knows what to do. I need to get rid of whatever this is that is, making me unwell. And your body's always trying to get back to homeostasis, right? And what if crying is just like that? What if feeling sad for a little while is just that, like your body doing its job, processing the information that's happening around you? Like, I love science, so it was interesting for me to look at things from that perspective.
Wow, that's fascinating. Like, whatever it takes to, I don't want to say trick your brain, that was the first thing I thought of, but to think of something in a different way to make it more bearable to go through, or maybe just a little twinge of less uncomfortable to go through, feel the feelings.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I am all like, I shove it down my kids' throats. Feel the feelings, crying is okay. Feel your feelings. It's okay. They're like,
you're not wrong.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Okay. What would you say the biggest lessons you learned about yourself after your shit show?
That I was built for struggle, and that we all are. We're all built for struggle. And this is such a hard lesson. Still, I have to remind myself, we were built for this, and this will make us better for going through this struggle. Like, you will learn something from it. It's going to suck. It's going to suck. And it's going to be so hard, But what's really fascinating to me is that the more I surrender, and I got the word surrender tattooed on the inside of my arm in my own handwriting after my dad died, because grief is one of those things that, I mean, it just like, you want to talk about lessons of surrendering and accepting what just comes at you.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose someone that you care about, holy crap, just surrendering to life on life's terms is really the only peaceful way to live, which, I've tried every other way. And unfortunately, it doesn't work. But surrendering to also the fact that I can trust myself and that I will be okay having gone through something, whether it's a hard conversation or setting a boundary or losing someone I love, speaking up, getting things wrong, making mistakes as a parent, those types of things, talking to my husband about, a trigger for me or something like that. Like, I'll survive, like, you'll be okay. And the more you ignore it, the more you try to pretend it's not happening or numb it away, the worse it's going to get. That, I think, my first marriage, this, was just a symptom of a bigger problem for both of us. I can't speak for his journey, but we had some unresolved issues, and together it made for a tumultuous, very rocky relationship. It was chaotic. It was intense. And we didn't know how to love ourselves, and we didn't know how to love each other. And I think that having gone through that has made me such a better wife now. And I don't think it's a joke, where people say like, oh, it was my practice marriage. It was. And I think it's also made me a better parent.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Oh my gosh. I just got goosebumps. I love what you just said. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable and like sharing your deep, dark shit.
Yeah.
I so appreciate
we all have it. I don't know what was in my DNA where my parents got together and had a baby. And it's like, this baby has DNA that's like, I'm going to tell everybody all my deepest, darkest secrets. Who wants to hear them?
Sorry, not sorry. Get ready.
Sorry, not sorry. And I don't think it's for everyone. Like, I don't want people watching anything to think like the way to healing is to go on Carly's show and like tell everybody your shit show. I don't think it's for everyone.
Right.
I do hope that people have at least one or two people, even if it's your therapist, to tell them to, because that's the work I do, is like, you have to have a great support system. And sometimes you have to be intentional about cultivating that. So again, what we're doing right here isn't for everyone.
Right. It is great for right now, and it's great for us, but we, have had those people and still have support people in our life that we can turn to for other shit going on. But I agree, it's not for everybody, but I love that you wanted to be on my show and share this with the viewers today. Yes. Okay. First, I want to say, second, third, whatever, I want to say, guys, if you have not picked up her book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit, please pick it up. It has so many fucking amazing nuggets. Seriously. And, I got my pages dog-eared and bookmarked. What is next for you, Miss Andrea?
I'm really excited to have different options for people in 2019 to work with me. It's been a long time coming, and figuring out what people need. I do like a few different things. Like, I do super deep transformational work, and I know that's not everybody's ready for that. So I have two programs, one that's that, and then another one that's a little bit more for beginners, who are just kind of getting into personal development and just starting out. And and if people want to go to yourkickasslife.com/apply, no obligation at all, but someone can get on the phone with you and tell you like where you're at. Here's what we have to offer. And if it's a great fit, great. And if not, you can get my book too, or listen to my podcast.
Awesome. Okay. I would love to put that link down in the comments when I post this, and the link to your book. And what was the third thing you just mentioned?
My podcast.
Yes. I want to put that link down. So I'll get those links from Emily, if that's okay. And oh my gosh, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Hugs to you.
Our stripey hug.
Oh my gosh. We are so kindred spirit, like sisters, Mr. Sisters, Mrs. Sisters, whatever.
Sisters from another mister.
Totally. And I love you, girl. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everybody for listening.
Yes. Okay. Take care, hon.
Bye.